Hello, everyone. I am Claudio Murugan, the host of the Spiritual Inspire podcast, and my guest today is Thomas Legrand. Holding a PhD in ecological economics and having studied international development, political science, and management, Thomas works in the field of sustainability for UN agencies, private companies, and NGOs. His focus is on forest conservation, climate change, sustainable finance, and organizational transformation. His spiritual journey began at the age of 23 with an encounter with native spirituality in Mexico before embracing the wisdom of a wide range of traditions and practices, including meditation, energetic healing, and Tai Chi Chuang. He lives with his wife and their two young daughters near Plum Village, the monastery of Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh in the southwest of France, his native country. He's the author of the book, The Politics of Being. Thomas, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you, Claudio. My pleasure to be with you.
So I would like to start by taking you back in time when you were 23, and I mentioned the trip to Mexico. What exactly happened?
A lot of things, I guess. What was funny, I was telling that story to a friend recently, in that when I was a student in France at that time, and I had this opportunity to do student exchange in Mexico. And while I was on the metro, there was someone who was reading Carlos Castañeda's book. It was called The Art of Dreaming, and I saw that would look like a great title. And I had also a teacher at that time who were a bit talking about drugs and trips, and he was mentioning he had an initiatic travel in South America when he was younger, and he said I was reading Castañeda, etc. So I bought that book as I was going to Mexico, and during the first months I've read it, and so wow, that's the craziest thing I've ever read. And then I ended up a few months later with shamans who were practicing to some degrees, this kind of Toltec Mexican shamanism. So, and when I connected with them, I instantly recognized the same day. I remember there was a night where we did a ceremony, and the same night I said, wow, I need to go back to Mexico to learn from them. And I think that's what I'm looking for in life. So then I prioritize my own inner spiritual journey as a result of this connection with these shamans, and especially this, I would say, reconnection to Mother Earth.
Yes, I mean that book is pretty wild. I was blown away by the content, especially the last part, and is quite unbelievable. You have to have a strong heart and the open mind to absorb those concepts, and everything he mentions there defies the law of physics pretty much, and everything we know in the normal life. So yes, you have to have an open mind. And while in Mexico, what type of medicine did you use?
In Mexico, well, I don't know why, but in Mexico, I had these encounters with different shamans that were somehow connected to each other and to some indigenous cultures, which, funnily enough, the main shaman was a doctor also, so also quite modern in some way. And he found out that what he found in these traditional cultures, in these teachings, was somehow a little bit more cultural layers, but at the same kind of concepts and myths that what you found in Carlos Castañeda's book, such as the warrior's journey, Tonal, Nahual, all these worldview, if I can use that word. But yeah, and they were working indeed with some plant medicines like the hikuri or peyote, and I spent some time with Charles, which are indigenous people in Mexico, working with that medicine, this cactus that you found in particular in a sacred desert in Mexico, Wirikuta. So I spent some time, and I spent some time also in the mountain of the south of Mexico, where especially women shamans use mushrooms or niños santos, so that would be saint children, as they call it, for medicine. No, and I think when I went there, I remember someone said, so you're coming here to heal yourself. I said, well, I'm not sick, or I was just taking it, at a very physical level. But yeah, I did connect with these plant medicines, these teachings, and yeah, that was really that really inspired me to prioritize my own journey. I think I found, as I said in my book, to me it says it's very important that a warrior finds a spiritual warrior finds a struggle that is worth it, and somehow this path of the spiritual warrior really resonated with something very deep in me. And I don't know, I remember even before going to Mexico, I remember I was in a concert of how do you say digital music? How do you say
electronic music?
Electronic music, yeah, with the Chemical Brothers, and that was a very wonderful concert. And I remember saying to a friend, "That's something of a warrior," and he told me, "Well, there's something strange when you speak that word. It sounds strange in you." So I really feel that very soul connection to this to the warrior archetype, I could say.
Yes, I mean you're very lucky to step on your spiritual path at an early age, 23, because some of us don't do that even when we are in our 50s or 60s. So at 23, you were quite lucky to find that path and discover it, go deeper. And in fact, you went back to Mexico and spent 3 years there. Am I correct?
Yeah, exactly. I had to. This was a student exchange, so I needed to come back to finish my studies for 4 months in France. But yeah, I had only this idea just to get back to it. And then funny enough, I did an internship at UNESCO just after ending my study. And the first day, my supervisor in UNESCO said, "Hey, I may have a consulting opportunity for you in Mexico after your 2 months internship." So that's how I got back to Mexico and just found more work there, and lived for 3 years and tried to learn as much as possible from this tradition.
Yeah, it's interesting how the universe works in our favor when we want to focus on a specific development. And because you work and you lived in Mexico and among indigenous people, it's very interesting that they always adopted a sustainable way of living. So why don't you think that we, at a large scale, want to learn from them and apply that way of treating nature and treating ourselves?
Yeah, definitely. I think to me that was a very important insight. How much we have to learn from native culture, in particular, to their link to Mother Earth, and even this concept of Mother Earth. We really they really consider themselves as part of a larger organism, and the children of Mother Earth that we need to treat with respect. And to me, is that also to recognize that the Earth is itself a living being, and it's an organism. And somehow, often indigenous cultures talk about the rivers as the veins of it's basically like a human body, right? The rivers can be the veins, and even you find in some cultures how different continents has to do with different organs have a function of themselves energetically into the Earth's body, and there is even medicine for taking care of the Earth, for nourishing energetically that body through ceremonies. And there's some work also I've been involved into it. And And to me, that's really important, and that's why we have nowadays also the proposal to recognize the rights of nature, whether the rights of Mother Earth per se, or the rights of specific rivers, species, ecosystems, etc. It's because we consider it or them living beings who have their own rights to be, right?
Yes, and that's the main issue. I just finished reading Nature Spirits by Susan Raven. She lives in Wales, and she's an amazing song writer as well. And she talks about the souls of every single stone or a patch of wood or the gnomes and every single spirit which takes place and takes care in nature of a particular place. And we have to come to that place with reverence. I said it many times in my interviews. We don't ask permission to enter a forest. We just go in. We don't take a moment to thank the ocean. We just dip in. So there are small gestures of recognition and appreciation that we should make it part of our way of living.
Yes, definitely. And as you said, no, there are spirits that take care of certain places, right? And through ceremonies, we are told that we are indeed nourishing the force that they are, managing. So we are nourishing this spirit to take care of these places, right? And in my book, Politics of Being, I even tell a story about how I met in dream with some of these beings. As I was in Madagascar, I was doing a trek in Madagascar and reaching up the top of the mountain at some point, and there was a tree with lots of banknotes, and I was tired, and I did not think too much, and I tried to laugh and take the banknotes, look at, and then the guy came in and say, no, you don't have to do that. He just put it back and did a prayer, etc. And at night, I realized that in my dream I had a spirit making fun of me and trying to bother me. And at some point I woke up. I was in the middle of the forest, and the guys were not with us anymore. I was only with a friend. And as I was tired, I knew I would sleep again and get back to this dream space where I could interact with this spirit. And somehow I had a lucid dream when I got back to dream, and I actually met that spirit, which was all dressed in red, like shamans in Madagascar have told me, is a traditional color. And I had an interaction with him that was really wonderful. No, I remember very well, their interaction and
yes,
how much
they can turn against us if we don't behave. And one, I think, the most well-known spirit is Pele in Hawaii. And Hank Wesselman wrote at length about it, about the spirits of Hawaii in his book. So this is how I came across, and I took that concept and I mentioned in my books as well, because the experiences he had, the profound experiences he had while going down the volcanoes in Hawaii were quite unbelievable. And he tested them pretty much with his practical mind over and over again, just to be sure that his mind is not playing tricks on him. So it's the spirit of the place who affects us in different ways.
Yeah, and that's why myself, even I do a lot of work in different countries with the UN, for example. And each time I go to a place, the first thing I do when stepping into that land is to pay respect and ask for guidance, for instruction, for being of service to the spirit of the land. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. So since Mexico, you transitioned to other spiritual perspectives like the Zen approach?
Yes, I think, even in Mexico, I just started to get interested by spirituality per se. Let's say to me, there was a lot of freedom and openness in these traditions I found in Mexico. So I started to be really interested how different cultures have connected to the spiritual life. And at some point later on, so I was back in uh, when was that? 2013. So 10 years later, I mean, a lot happened. I practice a lot also of Tai Chi Chuan, energetic healing, etc. And at some point, I found meditation. And in 2013, I first came here where I'm living now to Plum Village, which is the monastery of Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh, and which felt like really I was guided there, and somehow it was meant to be somehow, because the first day I met my wife, the woman who became my wife in 2009, and she said, "Oh, you're coming from France. There is a place I like to know in France, which is called Plum Village." So, and then in 2013, when we went there, I could feel already, even before going, there was something waiting for us, and we arrived there, and 6 months later, we just came to live here. And to me, it was a completely turned down from the spiritual warrior path, which I found also in myself some limitations to it. And I remember once being in Plum Village, and someone had a book in his hand, and I just catch a sentence was written, and just got a sentence was written on the book, and it says, "If you make your past a struggle, then it's not your past." No, so so that was really a complete shift somehow from this spiritual warrior perspective, and I find to me really medicine for my soul in Thich Nhat Hanh's teachings, especially the emphasis on joy, on ease, so which is reflected in that sentence.
So have you had the chance to interact with the master?
Yeah, a little bit. So when we went for the first time to Plum Village, indeed, we arrived, I think, on Friday. On Sunday, there was this gathering of the different hamlets with for a teaching with Thich Nhat Hanh, but which started with this famous song about Avalokiteshvara, the Buddha of compassion, and somehow Thich Nhat Hanh guides this song, and he was doing some gestures, and yeah, I realized maybe almost half of the people of my group just cried, just touched by, and I could feel the power of the energy that was involved in this chanting. And yeah, then when we were there, I mean, the day I was telling my boss that I was quitting my job to come to live here, no, rather the week, that's when Thich Nhat Hanh had a stroke. So I had to check with my wife. Are we still sure we're going? And he said yes. So there is the community, there are the teaching, the practice. So yes, we're going. So then we had the interactions we had with Thich Nhat Hanh was after the stroke, he could not talk anymore. So there was some silent interaction, and yeah, which are very personal, and it's very subjective somehow.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really, I mean, the Thich Nhat Hanh passed away last year on January 22nd, which was the day my book Politics of Being was launched. So it was a very important day, and as he passed away, I reflected also of I have been so important in my life, but at the same time, we never probably spoke directly, right? So, but yes, there are some very meaningful interactions in Plum Village, and also things in dreams, etc.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. And that area is also known, is close to the Pyrenees. So is also known as the Catars area when they lived 700 years ago. And I have another guest from that area, Sophia Anaya. She's from UK and she lives there, and she mentioned about the potency of the land and the spirits in that part of France.
Yes, indeed. And I think there is a very strong sacred feminine energy. We say in general in the southwest of France, there have been a lot of apparition, like in Lourdes, of Mary. So yeah, it's and the Catars have been also very interesting movement of spiritual renewal movement in the Middle Age that I feel connected to also.
Yeah. Thomas, I would like to switch now towards the work you are doing in sustainability, climate change, and everything we mentioned in the introduction. And I've been a proponent of humanity's increased consciousness for a long time. I mean, all my books mention this direction, and it seems that those in power are doubling down on their broken policies and blunders instead of admitting their mistakes and trying to fix them. Are they lacking an ethical and spiritual compass? How do you see this aspect, especially that you are involved with some of them?
Sure. Well, yeah, definitely. I think, we more and more recognize we are in a systemic crisis. Somehow all our institutions which brought us here seems to no longer be able to cope with the challenges of the 21st century. I think COVID right now has been very helpful in terms of really making space for, like, we cannot, I'm working, for example, with United Nations Development Program and other development agencies, NGOs, some companies, around sustainability issue. And I think there has been a really recognition that business as usual will not do, and we need to look for innovative approaches. We need to work more with a view of systemic change. I see more and more this agenda around consciousness more and more visible. I'm leading myself an initiative within the United Nations Development Program, which is called the Conscious Food Systems Alliance. So people find already amazing that the UN agency uses this kind of language around consciousness. And we are partnering with some of the best scientists that are positioning this agenda, including, for example, Christine Wamsler, whose work is quoted in the IPCC report. So now people recognize that, to address climate change, we need also to think about they mention inner transition, in people's life, in people's individual life. They mention, the change in values, etc., and the change in mindsets. And more, people I'm working with recognize that we need to work on this change of mindset. And we are partnering, for example, with another initiative that is called the Inner Development Goals, that are making the claim that to achieve the sustainable development goals, we need to develop certain inner human capacities and skills. So I think this is getting very quickly traction, as we look collectively into the change that needs to happen for the ecological climate transition. We start to realize, how deep it is and how difficult it is. And that helps us touch that, okay, well, that's, not only a technical change, it's a change of civilization. It's also a cultural change. So I think this recognition is growing very quickly. I go even beyond that, people recognize how the inner dimensions are important to achieve, sustainable development goals, sustainability, etc. In my book, Politics of Being, I go even one step beyond that, is that actually this is a real human development. So, we have, and mentioning that our main development paradigm has been very until now has been very materialistic in terms, and we have been measuring mainly countries' progress by the economic production, GDP.
The GDP,
right? Yeah, and this reflects of a whole worldview, a whole culture, some call the story of separation, with some values around materialism, individualism, reductionism, anthropocentrism, etc. And in my book, Politics of Being, I think I've researched for 10 years, what is a wisdom-based approach to development. And I come to the conclusion that is mentioned, the Earth Charter say, when basic needs have been met, human development is primarily about being more rather than having more. So Politics of Being is about prioritizing being more and how our institutions can help for that, how our societies could be organized for that, including, our education, health, governance systems, etc., etc.
Yes, just moving forward based on concept of GDP is not sustainable, that's for sure. And is the program you are working on trying to attract people from outside the UN, such as Vandana Shiva, which is very vocal on both on a spiritual side, and she understands that aspect of a human being or a culture, and the sustainable agriculture for India, because she is, again, a very good figure to talk about this and bring some feedback to the program and your work.
Sure. We are, so this is an alliance. It's convened by UNDP, but, all our members are coming from different organizations and different parts of the world. And we have just been launched at the end of last year. And we are in the process of engaging her and our organization, yes.
Okay.
And together with other leaders in the field of especially agroecology, regenerative agriculture, how these, highlighting that a lot of these agroecological movements are based on a different worldview, on a different set of values, etc. So we need also, if we want to support that transition, we need to work on these inner dimensions.
Okay, and how is this tying into, let's say, one of your chapters in the book, which is called, I think, One Government or World Government or something like that? I can't remember exactly. How is your vision of that?
I think you're referring to a chapter that is called One World.
One World, sorry. Yes, yeah.
And the following chapter is called Many Nations. So and maybe I have to say a little bit more about this concept of politics of being. To mention that I say spiritual values are the foundations of the politics of being. So I have tried in my research to identify where are now the seeds of this new development paradigm emphasizing being. And I found that them in different communities, which are both scientific, because these values have become fields of scientific research in the last decades, but also these communities are proposing agendas or initiatives for social change. So I have one chapter in my book on each of them. So the first one is about systemic, complex, and integral thinking. The second one is on life, like in the regenerative movement, which emphasize that we need to harmonize ourselves with how nature works and even organize our societies mimicking how nature works. Another one is happiness. It has been proposed as a new development paradigm also by Bhutan, gross national happiness. And we have more and more countries now advocating for a well-being economy, etc. The other one is love, or empathy and compassion. I mentioned, for example, the Charter for Compassion, and many cities in the world proclaiming themselves compassionate cities and with action plans around that. Peace, or a culture of peace. There has been a resolution in the UN and a lot of work on that in the UN. Mindfulness, we know that the science of mindfulness that emphasize all the benefits of this practice and how these can be leveraged including for public policies. For example, there is a report in the United Kingdom championed by a group of members of parliament, which highlight the potential of mindfulness in different sectors: education, health, business, justice, etc., etc. So I said, to me, that is, progress of our society is actually cultivating these values. And now we have ways, and as identified by science, we know how to cultivate them at the individual and the collective level. So, and each of these different communities have some recommendation about what this means in terms of public policies and systems in different sectors. So in the politics of being, I bring all of them together in a vision for a new development paradigm for societies. And coming back to what you mentioned on one world, many nations, I said that these values are universal. So, and being is something that connects us with one another, because being is interbeing. Mystics from all different traditions have now realized that there is a fundamental spiritual experience that is common to all of them, which is, some call it oneness, unity consciousness, or interbeing, the fact that we feel really connected with all that is. And because we feel connected, we of course want to take care of one another and take care of the earth. So this is really can be this paradigm around being can really bring ourselves together, while the paradigm of having and economic growth tend to divide us, because what you have is something I don't have, right? So so this being agenda can be a way to unify humanity, and that's what I talk about in my chapter on One World, right? And at the same time, as I was saying before, each land has its own function in the Earth's body, in the Earth's organism, and it's true also of nations, which somehow express some of the qualities of that land. So each nation has also each culture has its own connection to what is the good life, let's say, right? And they tend to highlight some of these values I've mentioned. That's why maybe Bhutan, because of its Buddhist background, will emphasize happiness, right? The end of suffering. Or some that are more maybe coming from the religions of the book may emphasize more love, or etc., like the Charter for Compassion, for example. But when you dig into that, you find that, okay, you may enter through the concept of happiness, but then you touch upon all these different values I've mentioned. So it's just like each culture tends to emphasize and have its own relationship with that, with being, or which is just an expression of the divine, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying also many nations. And that's a concept of unity in diversity that you find in nature, and in also many even constitutions like the EU, or countries like Indonesia, or many others.
Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful concept, and I wish you luck in drawing the attention and the funding and the energy around it. But you mentioned something very interesting, that each land has his own power, his own energy, his own culture. And this is what concerns me and other people as well, that there is this forced migration of people from their own land to new lands. So when you come to the new land, you don't understand the local culture, you don't understand the power of the land, and you try to, or unconsciously maybe, you don't apply the same rules, you don't apply the same concepts and the same values. So then the traditions of, let's say, North America will diminish, because now you have people from the South who come with a different type of value. So in Europe, you have people from Africa and Middle East coming with a different set of values. And those lands will remain depleted of humans, of resources, of intelligence, of energy, while others will be overcrowded with a multitude of energies and mindsets and traditions, and it will create chaos. So we don't have a balance anymore. And I think this is, in my opinion, and based on what I listen to other people which are much more smart and much more um, up to date than me, is that it's a forced intentional migration, and this imbalance is created with malevolent intention. Do you see the same way?
I'm not sure. This is a very complex issue. So there is the question of people losing their tradition in relation to the land, in relation to sacred sites, etc., which is probably happening in many parts of the world. At the same time, I would say that it's something that because of its spiritual nature, it's something that can be rediscovered by each generation. And I'm confident that there is actually, even for example in Europe, where we have been a little bit our roots, or indigenous roots, somehow have been cut. I'm confident there are indeed more people than we're seeing that could tell us, how to take care of the land, where are the sacred sites, what to do, etc. Because you just you can receive that from the worlds of spirits can tell you. It has happened to me to tell you about some functions of the lands and how to do with it, etc. So I don't think the fact that traditions can be cut off is a major hindrance to recover that knowledge. I'm also been very interested about people, for example, in Europe, bringing some indigenous people from South America that have this strong connection to the land, etc. And they have been able to come and tell us about our own land and how to take care of it. In terms of, I talk about in my book, I talk about nation soul, and I've been and some people have told me, be careful. It's a very dangerous concept in terms of nationalistic claims, etc. And I do think, that we need to strengthen our connections to our cultural and spiritual roots in different cultures. But as I said in the book, also, we don't have to take a very materialistic or reductionistic approach to this concept of nations soul. And I often say, you have some governments that, wants to a little bit recreate and fossilize somehow this connection to a nation soul. And I take the example because it's always helpful to compare, what happens at the collective level and what happens at the individual level. And throughout my book, I show that spiritual teachings can also apply to the collective level. So I said, if I want to become myself, which is, being this agenda of the politics of being, that being more, which makes becoming more of myself and a better version of myself, just simple definition. If I want to become more Thomas, I'll certainly would not define what Thomas is and then just try to stick to it as much as possible. It's more like I will connect more deeply with myself and try to express what's my essence, to express myself in the world in the way that feels more authentic. And so it's an emergent process. It's not something that just can be defined as some governments, are somehow trying to do. So because it's I do feel that these nation soul, and some people have a little bit of difficulties also, even as a spiritual concept, that nations can have a soul somehow. It's a concept, for example, I've borrowed, for example, to Sri Aurobindo, who talks very eloquently about that. And I think these nation souls do not necessarily relate to the fact that people are not coming from their ancestors who are not in that land. There's a dimension of that, but I think we need to be much more open, as it's a spiritual concept. If I take my own country, France, which is famous worldwide somehow for culture, arts, etc. Well, this, which I think is somehow part, and I would say even the the thinking part also. Well, a lot of the great artists that have flourished and that have expressed this nation soul actually came from other countries. If you take, let's say, the painters around Picasso in the 30s, etc. Well, Picasso there was some coming from Spain, some coming from East Europe, etc. So this the energy which can connect to some values, some ideals. These are spiritual values, and they can be, and people from all over the world can relate to it, can be attracted to it, and can help it flourish this national soul or essence, let's say.
Yes, I mean, we have Romanian writers and artists going to France and finding the right environment in which they flourished. And some people, they still think that, Eugen Ionesco was French, but he was Romanian, but he flourished there. He was able to become who was at that time because he found the right environment. So yes. And talking about, climate change, and this is a very delicate subject because the powers to be switch it from climate warming to climate change, and the result of back and forth. I find, as an outsider, looking at some news and alternative media, there is a lot of hypocrisy in what they are saying, and they are applying this climate change concept only where they want for us to focus our attention. So recently, in Dubai, there's a conference on climate, I think, and Al Gore was there, and he's a proponent of this concept for many, many years, and he was very angry and very upset that people are not paying attention to climate change. But at the same time, he never mentioned the ecological disaster that happened by the blowing up of the Russian-German gas pipeline, which his government helped to blow up. So that's an ecological disaster. And 2 weeks later, we had the East Palestine cataclysm in Ohio. And people have to move out. People will get sick. The land will get infested. The water won't be drinkable. And the government doesn't do anything. They don't want to talk about it. Media doesn't talk about it. So when you see this type of hypocrisy, what type of base these politicians and credibility these politicians have to believe and talk to us about climate change?
Yeah, I was wondering, who are they when you say, they are, I guess they are mentioning the governments, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So my sense is that the governments actually lag very much behind what should be done and in terms of climate leadership. So I don't feel like it's so much. So they are trying. I mean, of course, they have to recognize that climate change is a real issue, and we need to address it. It's a major threat for the future of humanity. It's a major transformation. I personally believe that it has to come together with a new development paradigm, as I said, politics of being. So there is such a profound reorientation of our societies. And I mentioned, the inner transition of individuals. Many of us at some point in life, change what we prioritize in our lives, etc. And I think this needs to happen now at a global level and at a collective level, right? We need this really profound reorientation from having economic growth to being or collective flourishing. But that is why it's so difficult to do, right? Because right now, the way the system works, especially organized around economic growth, to say it simply, is a major hindrance to tackle seriously the climate crisis. And for many reasons, somehow governments are, part of these systems and are very have a lot of difficulties to let go of that old systems and shift or development trajectories. So they still need to do something. And what you mentioned is, I guess, the importance of not separating the climate crisis with a broader ecological crisis, because there could be this tendency. Even if you look at the UN convention, there is one convention on climate change, there is one on biodiversity, etc., etc. So, but more and more we recognize that all these crises are going together, and we need to address them in an integrated manner, right? So we can't, the same, we can't have climate policies that go against biodiversity. If you just want to do carbon sink, let's say, or with only reforestation of monocultures, well, it will certainly have an adverse effect on biodiversity. But I would say even, recognize that this is also a human crisis. It's also a cultural crisis, and which are evolutive crises. So that are crises that are inviting us to this major cultural transformation. I said that cultural transformation is of a spiritual nature, because, as I've said, it is about expressing these higher values, and it's about really getting in touch with our spiritual nature, and the fact that we are deeply interconnected at a material level, but also at a spiritual level.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And if I may say something, hopefully you'll agree with me. So your book, Politics of Beings, is not politically correct. Am I right?
That's not what I would not define it as not politically correct or politically correct, but I would say at least it's a very different view. I was looking for a spiritual approach or wisdom-based approach to development. So, and my main surprise while I was writing that book is that it seemed to me so important to articulate that new perspective on development. And I was very surprised that there was no book like that at the moment. And the fact that I was building on something that has been said in a very important document, the US Charter, which said development is primarily about being more, and nobody figured out, what this means, both theoretically and in practice. So that's what I wanted to offer with this book, and it certainly is a very different look at our social potential.
Yeah, so let's promote this concept as much as possible. Thomas, we are approaching the end of the interview. Any final thoughts?
Any final thoughts? Well, I inviting people, to connect to my website, politicsofbeing.com. As you will see, there is a lot of endorsements of major political and spiritual leaders. So I think it's a very and people find it as a breakthrough and somehow that is able to bring this kind of spiritual insights to the mainstream discussion on development, politics, sustainability. So I invite every people to get familiar with this reflection and to connect together to move this agenda forward.
Thank you very much. Yes, indeed, we need to bring spirituality more into the business, more into political, to bridge that gap, as you mentioned, and have a more ethical way of living and dealing with each other. Thomas, thank you very much for your time. It's been quite a pleasure.
Thank you, Claudio. Great to have this time with you. Spend this time with you.
And to my guests, thank you for watching. Like it, share it. Check the politicsofbeings.com website. You're going to find more information there. Get a free copy of my book when you visit my website. And until next time, love and gratitude.